Good evening, everybody. Let us begin our service tonight by reciting the Sunday congregational prayer. The words will be shown for you to follow along. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. This evening's speaker is a well-known personality here at the Vedanta Society, supporting the organization in many capacities. He's a previous speaker, both as a symposium speaker as well as giving Sunday talks, full-time Sunday talks. His selected topic for tonight is Swami Vivekananda, the first global preacher. Please welcome to the podium Abhijit, Sarcar.
Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritam gamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From the darkness, lead us to light. From death, lead us to immortality. Peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends, and welcome. So today I have been giving the topic to speak on Vivekananda. As a preacher, as the first global preacher. When Swami gave me this topic, I kind of looked up at him like, the first global preacher? And he said, yes, the first global preacher. And since then, I've spoken to some of my friends and they were like, oh, but what about Buddha? Wasn't he the first global preacher? I guess that wouldn't count because what your descendants, your disciples preached, that doesn't count. So, and he did a good job because he lived a long life and he was from a princely family, so he knew administration and everything, so he coordinated, he did wonderful stuff. But Vivekananda had some other advantages. He could jump across the sea and go to a different continent and preach. So I guess we can take that first global preacher out of the way now. By the way, now all the preachers, you'll see all the gurus, they are live. You can reach them at the click of a button. But for Vivekananda, his leadership skills were evident from very early childhood. We could see that as a kid, he would show leadership skills when he was with friends who were much older than him. Even as a youth, he was always looked up upon by his peers. And when Sri Ramakrishna saw him, he saw somebody very special in him. And he had predicted that this kid is going to be a preacher, a world preacher. And there used to be no world preachers back then. After Sri Ramakrishna passed away, Vivekananda, he got his disciples together and he started up a monastery. There were some devotees who supported them. But very soon, it just so happened that all the sponsors, they died. And he tried to raise some funds to get things going. It didn't quite work out. And partly because of that, it was in some state that had to be kind of disbanded. Only a few person would stay in the monastery, and he became a wandering monk. And that did something very good because he came across people of all strata of the society, and they got to see him. And by his personalities, there were many who said, Swamiji, you have to speak in the parliament of religions. And I guess word got around all over the world that there is a parliament of religions in Chicago, and somebody needs to represent Hinduism. And all of you guys, I guess growing up in India, we used to hear that from a very small age. Oh, Swamiji gave this speech in the World Parliament of Religions, and that was like a big deal. And I sometimes wondered, what is this Parliament of Religions and what's the big deal? I can understand he gave a great speech, but what's so big deal? It turns out, I did some research, and it was a big deal. So the United States decided to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus coming over into this new world, and Chicago decided that it's going to host it. Chicago had, they were pretty much ravaged in the Civil War, and then some 22 years ago, there was a big fire which kind of destroyed the whole city. Now, if you take a tour in Chicago, you'll come across many old buildings. They will say, this building is as old as that great fire. So as the city was coming off and trying to rebuild itself, they wanted to bid for this, what was the world's Columbian Exposition, a big fair to celebrate the event. And they got the bid ahead of New York and DC and St. Louis. And and the World Parliament of Religion was like kind of the finale to this event. The fair itself, it was all along the Michigan River. For few miles they had set up the whole fair. And the first time they had this big Pharaoh's wheel out there. Hundreds of new houses were built, temporary houses, and tens of thousands of exhibits were there. And some 27 million tickets were sold. 27 million tickets. I mean, to get things in perspective, the population of US was around 60, 65 million that time. People mortgage their house just so that they can come and attend this exposition. And people from all across the globe, they came over. It was kind of an unprecedented something. And a couple of years before the event, they had been sending out invitations to all different major religious groups. And past all this, later on Swami Vivekananda said, this event was made for me. It was all being organized just so that I can go. But this is after the event, oftentimes after the event it's easy to see and look back and see that everything adds up. But for Hinduism, no invitation was sent out. And I guess part of it, the reason was there was no such organization in Hinduism. Like Hinduism, everybody all across the land, they in India, they practice Hinduism. There is no pope or anything, no major organizations. Anyways, so Swami Vivekananda, after some contemplation, and after he got the blessing from Holy Mother, he decided to go. And part of the reason was he was hoping, he had seen all this poverty in the country, and he saw that what the country really needed was people getting at least nourished, some monetary help. That was what he thought, that maybe I'll give them knowledge, religion, and maybe I can get some support for the country. That was the idea. So he shows up, I'm here to represent Hinduism, and they were like, who are you? And why should we allow you to speak? And by the way, everything is all settled. And he was quite disappointed. So he said, okay, might as well go around, do something, preach. But as it turned out, it was a disguise and blessing. He happened to be in New England here, and he got some stellar, people were so attracted to him. One thing led to the other, and there was Professor Wright of Harvard University who gave a recommendation that this guy, he has more knowledge than all of us put together, Harvard professors put together. And for him to even asking for credential is like asking credential for the sun to shine. So that kind of credential he got. Anyways, so big event. He finally manages to go in there. This, what is called this Hall of Columbus, that was the hall. It held 5,000 people, Can't imagine. It's like a stadium, but it was a hall and no microphone. You just have to speak out. I guess the acoustics must have been pretty good at that. And all these delegates, they marched in. And Swami Vivekananda, he didn't have a speech, prepared speech, and the nerves started getting to him. And he saw like all these other delegates, they were giving good speeches, all written out. And when the word got to him that you're next, he said, can you delay it? I don't feel prepared. And this happened a couple of times. Up until then, and then he bowed down to Saraswati, Devi Saraswati, and then he took up the stage. And all the other delegates, customary greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and you would address the organizer, thanks, and such and people, thanks, and then you'd begin the speech. And for him, he just spoke out, sisters and brothers of America. And in almost like as though he embraced the entire audience out there. And 5,000 people rose up to their feet and started applauding. The organizer of the event, Mr. Barrows, he later wrote a report, and then he said, like, such was the applause, like a peal of applause, it just lasted for minutes. Now imagine 5,000 people just applauding for minutes. And that's where, I guess, Vivekananda came into being. He became a global preacher, not just in United States, but also in India. Because in India, people, he was a great sannyasi, a great sadhu, but as I said, there was no organization behind preaching or anything of that sort. Some kings would invite you, but to reach out to the population who needed the message of Vedanta, people were demoralized over being subjugated over 200 years. What used to be a thriving economy, a thriving place of spirituality, their morale was broken down. So, speaking of Swamiji's message, I guess, there are some strange notions. Just to even some well-known saints, one holds Sri Ramakrishna in very high esteem, and also Vivekananda. But he would say, Sri Ramakrishna, he had all the knowledge. And Vivekananda, he had all the oratory, and which Sri Ramakrishna didn't have. So, it was like the lame on top of the blind, that kind of a situation, which is kind of odd. First of all, if somebody has the idea that Sri Ramakrishna didn't have the oratory, he didn't have the means to communicate, should really come here for our Tuesday classes. And so I guess to understand Swami Vivekananda, we should really take a little bit of understanding of Sri Ramakrishna, because it was true that Vivekananda was the one who propagated Sri Ramakrishna's message. Once Swami Shivananda, when he was the president of the Ramakrishna Mission, the Lady Governor General came to visit Belur Math, Lady Minto, and she said, "Oh, this is a great organization that Sri Ramakrishna has built." And Shivanandaji, he said, "Okay, to tell you the truth, it was Sri Ramakrishna who built this." Is that so? Yes. He was the one who started this organization. He was the one who trained, literally shaped Narendranath into becoming Vivekananda. And it was his message, his teachings, his training of how to run such organization. Sri Ramakrishna was the one behind it. So, who is Sri Ramakrishna? Oh. Vivekananda himself said that I wouldn't write a biography of Sri Ramakrishna because I don't feel competent about it. And but I guess Saradanandaji said that if anybody understood Sri Ramakrishna, that was Vivekananda. So I'll try to use Sri Vivekananda's words about Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna told many times. Now there's many ways to understand a personality, but I'll go with what I have at hand. He said many times that person who was Rama, that person who was Krishna, is now in this body, And that the experiences within this has exceeded all the Vedas and Vedantas. Saradanandaji says that Sri Ramakrishna was the totality of the essence of the Vedas. The essence of the Vedas is all there in Sri Ramakrishna, and it's nothing's all of that essence, the consummation of that essence is Sri Ramakrishna. And so what are the Vedas? Vedas is not just the text as explains Swamiji. It's the beginningless and endless knowledge. Beginningless and endless knowledge. Many other religions claim that. I've heard other religions saying, like our scripture is basically beginningless and endless knowledge. But what is it? It's if you meditate on Sri Ramakrishna, try to understand that he's saying what's inside this has exceeded even the Vedas. So it's that knowledge that's working behind that body. What's in that consciousness is the Vedas, the truth. Truth is one, Ekam Sat. And that truth is the truth of everybody, everything. It permeates everything. People, moving, non-moving, everything carries that truth. If you go small enough, they're made of atoms. And each atom has so much intelligence. Scientists just wonder of how much intelligence an atom has. It will just take certain amount of energy, it will reject certain other kind of energy. It behaves, it will want to affine with something else. It's a living entity. And that which is driving that atom is also the same truth that's probably drawing an apple to the earth, or the moon that's circling around the earth, or the sun that is glowing with all this energy, or that leaf which is gathering that energy. And that's which is working right here with all our desires, aspirations. All that is driven by that one truth. That scientists which are seeking that truth, and maybe some physicists call it by one name, the rishis, they know that truth through experience. Ekam Sat. And Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda says that in every generation such personalities come who has that experiences and teaches that. And Sri Ramakrishna is that avatar of this age. Things at that point of time had gone down. People were suffering. Religion had subsided. And he says, like, with every age, the further down things go, it comes back with ever more vigor. That is Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna knew when he saw Naren, even the first time, that this is Narendranath, whom he had seen in his vision, who is going to be his mate in this, to carry his message forward. On his very second visit, he actually kind of knocked him down with his touch. And he got to interview him, and he confirmed that indeed he is the person. And Vivekananda doesn't remain. Narendranath had no recollection of this, but he heard from others, like Sri Ramakrishna had talked about this, that he had confirmed that that was the guy. Sri Ramakrishna had made a sketch out, and he had written it down, that Narendranath will teach the world. And when he goes abroad, he will roar like a lion. That's what he does. Oftentimes this doesn't get quoted, that যখন বাইরে যাবে হাঁক দেবে, he will roar. At one point of time, he actually said directly to Narendranath that, you are the one who is going to be preaching all that you are learning from me. And Narendranath said, oh, can't do that. That's what it is. Basically saying thanks, but no thanks. I can't do all that. And he said, Tor ghar korbe. You may not want to do, but your shoulders will carry it. Literally, your very bones will make you work. At other instance, Sri Ramakrishna once asked him, well, what's your ideal? What would you like to do? He said, well, I would like to meditate on Brahman all the time. Just come out and take my food and go back to meditation. Something like what Sri Ramakrishna himself had an experience. For 6 months he was kind of in that stage. He said, that's what I want. And Sri Ramakrishna chastised him. Like, no. How selfish of you. You are that big banyan tree under which you are going to give shade to everybody else. So I guess it was a prophecy fulfilled at that point, when Narendranath stood in front of 5,000 people there talking about Vedanta, the truth. He gave some 6 speeches out there. In one of the speeches, he says, we keep talking about who am I in our Vedantas. Like, one of the very basic tenets is like, who am I? Who are you? And he says, he talks about a rishi who found out this truth. And having found out this truth, he comes out and he announces in front of a people who stood up in wonder, listening to him. And it's a phrase from, we are reading this text, right? And the irony is, he's standing, here is a rishi standing in front of 5,000 people who is listening to him in awe at this message. And what's the message? When we talk of who am I, we have this notion, basically an identification of who I am. Typically, I am a husband, and a wife, or a wife, a child. I have this house. I have maybe a mortgage that's bothering me. And this identification we carry along. It may be a changing identification, but we carry this along all the time. Even when we go to sleep and we are in a dream, we carry that identification. We wouldn't walk into a women's restroom, for example, if you're a man. We'll jolly well know that we are a man. And all this identification, our dreams are basically a reflection of our identification. Even so much so as if we are across lives, transmigration, we carry all the impression. Oftentimes as a kid we do recollect them, and later on that gets suppressed. So this is our identification. And the worst kind of identification that Sri Ramakrishna used to say was that I am a sinner, that I have sinned. I'm carrying this guilt of my sins. And that's when Sri Ramakrishna himself had practiced Christianity, but he wouldn't go inside a church. He would just wait outside because he didn't want to hear this doctrine of sin. And Vivekananda talks, he chants this verse, Veda hametam purusham mahantam adityavarnam tamasaf parastat. Hear ye, children of immortal bliss, even ye that reside in higher spheres, I have found the Ancient One who is beyond all darkness, all delusion. This is Vivekananda, who is also speaking from his experience, that children of immortal bliss, tameva viditva atimitrumeti nanyaf pantha vidyate anaya. Knowing him alone, you shall be saved from death over again. And he says, children of immortal bliss. What a sweet, what a hopeful name. Allow me to call you, brethren, by that sweet name, heirs of immortal bliss. Yeah, the Hindu refuses to call you sinners. Ye are the children of God, the sharers of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings. This is something, I guess, many people, most people are hearing for the first time. Because this idea that you are divine, you are not sin. It's not like you're a sinner and then you have to overcome something. Find a way out. You are already that. You are perfect. In another instance, I guess one of the other basic tenets of Sri Ramakrishna was he was somebody who had tried out all different paths. He was a lover of truth, and he tried out different faiths, different means of trying to reach the truth. And for him, he said, Jato mat, tato path. Means as many paths, so many faiths. That's again a culmination of all different experiences. Vivekananda says, we believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. For a Vedantic point of view, if somebody says, but my truth I know that my religion is true. It's written in our scriptures. And yes, that's true. You're right. And somebody else says, but no, how can that be? Mine is the real one. And Vedantists will say, true. That is also true. And then somebody might say, hey, you said both are true. Yes, true. Both are true. All of these are truth. Anything that leads you to that higher truth is truth. As the different streams having their sources in different places all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to Thee. There was a nice verse. I had seen it in the internet and I couldn't find out. And this happens to be from a Purana. And it's a literal translation of that shloka. I wish I had gotten that. It's some Shiva Purana or something, some version of Shiva Purana. And he also quotes. This is from the opening speech. He says, he quotes from Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tams tathaiva bhajamyaham. Mama vartman vartante manushyav partha sarvasha. Whoever comes to me through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. And in the final day of in his final address, he spoke help and not fight, assimilation and not destruction, harmony and peace and not dissension. In the Parliament of Religions, there were like about close to 200 addresses being given. Most of them were like Christians. About 150 addresses were given for Christianity of different denominations. From Hinduism, there were 8. I mean, I could see 6 from Swami Vivekananda. I cannot account for the other 2. But later on, as I said, Mr. Barrows had made a collection of recollection of his account. And there he says that initially there were some Christian organizations who didn't approve of this Parliament of Religions. They said, well, Christianity is, if we come together in the same podium and say that we're all together, then how is it so that we can say that we are superior? And Mr. Barrows defended that no, we should have this so that once people see that there is this much common, but whatever else is there in Christianity, that's how we can show that we are superior to the rest of with the others, and Christianity will get a boost. But actually, it didn't quite turn out that way. And instead, America got to open up. And oftentimes, as they were sending people outside of the Christian nations, they realized to the sensitivities of the other cultures, and they adjusted accordingly. But the other thing also happened was there was the society in general, they opened up to other traditions. And and that continues. Even like the Vedanta Society here is a product of that. And somebody who made a comment that once America opened up to what's that term? Basically, once they opened up, there is no going back. So, as I said, this setup, I mean, when we talk about global preaching, I mean, that doesn't exclude the preaching that Swami gave to India. And India opened up, like, so USA was a gift, made a gift of Swami Vivekananda to India. Because when he went back, now he had the entire nation out there to welcome him. When first Vivekananda's speech was made, there were reporting all over. So at that time, only media was newspapers. I mean, they were not even radio at that point of time. And when the brother disciples of Swami Vivekananda, when they read the reports, and then they said, oh, looks like there is a Vivekananda who did so well for Hinduism. They didn't know who was Vivekananda, because Vivekananda didn't take up this name until just before he left for US. He used to go about with different names. Sometimes he'd go about as Satchidananda or Vividishananda. So they said, we have an inkling that Naren is the guy. Who is it? But even if it is not, we don't care. We're just happy. And when they got the letter from Swamiji that his work, his speeches got received so well, then they realized, oh, it is our Naren. Now, one thing that Swamiji always said, that the gist of my teaching is basically I mean, this is one quote from Raja Yoga. Now, Raja Yoga was he made his commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras and many more chapters. That's what is known as Yoga Raja Yoga, and it was published while he was in USA. And there was one lady, Sarah Waldo, who was taking all these notes from him. Basically, he would take a verse and sit down and meditate while she was waiting with the pen ready to take down notes. And as sometimes he would take some time, he would meditate, and then he would give his commentary, and she would take notes. And that's how this collection was made up. So, I mean, this is a very famous quote, that the goal is to manifest the divine within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy. By one or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. You know, there were times when he would give 2 speeches a day. I mean, he went around for about the rest of 1893 and the next year, 1894, he went about touring and giving lectures, different places. And the next year, he founded what was the Vedanta Society of New York. And I guess this was a central theme of his talks, that you have to become free. Understand that you're not free, that you are bound. You're bound by the laws of nature. You are being tossed around the way that you are. And then you become free. And one lady who kind of thought over this, and she asked, what about if I become free of all this that is me? What happens? What about my individuality? And he says, but where is your individuality? You know, if you really think about it, where is your individuality? It just falls apart. If you can meditate on whatever that you think you are, that as an individual, your individuality will just fall apart. And many people have the opportunity of meetings, of coming close to Swami Vivekananda personally. And they told that it's one thing to listen to Swami in public, but coming in touch with him is just quite something else. He would be very, very childlike, very simple. Even I'm told, like when he was, I read somewhere that he became so popular at the Parliament of Religions that sometimes he would just start walking from one end to the other for whatever reason, and just people would start breaking into applause. And he would just take that applause like in a very boyish manner, like he'd fold hands and wave and all that. There was in California, we might have heard of the Mead sisters. There were 3 sisters who were, and Swamiji went and stayed with them for a few weeks. Swamiji, at one point of time, he just showed up at their place. I've come to stay with you guys. And it was such a joy. They said, as people asked him, look, what was it like to be with him? And he said, well, he was just like a brother. You know, he was making merry and jokes, and he had raised our consciousness to such an extent that we didn't realize at that point of time, like at what high we were running at that time. It just so happened that once there was a staircase that all the 3 sisters were coming down, and Swamiji was leading them, and the one who was just behind her, she slipped her a step, and by mistake she went in and held his shoulder just so that she doesn't fall. And Swamiji was in such an exalted state that as her hand fell, she just merged into that oneness. She lost it right then and there. They held him together, and she said, I saw God at that point of time. You may have heard of Sister Devamata, Laura Glenn. She was a disciple of Swami Paramanand, and I think she was the one who put together the inspired talks. She had heard Swami Vivekananda multiple times, but she never had the thing to go up and talk to him. So she didn't get to know him in person, but she recounts that she went to listen to Swamiji's lecture, and she just doesn't remember. She just went to a different realm. And by the time she came back, till the lecture was over and people were already leaving. Once in London, I think it was in London, somewhere in England, I forget now where it was, he was speaking to a big audience there. And then at the end of his lecture, one person raised his hand and he said, I've been listening to you, and what you have been talking is all correct, and you have been talking very well. But let me tell you, you are speaking nothing new. All these things are there in the Christian texts. And that is true. I mean we go over many such texts, and Swami takes them over. And Swami Vivekananda, of course, he used to carry the Imitation of Christ and the Bhagavad Gita. These were the two texts he would carry all this time when he was wandering around. And he said, yes, but the fact that I am telling you, and people are hearing it for the first time, and I'm explaining it, don't you think I'm explaining it well? And the entire audience just started clapping then. Well, Swamiji, of course, he was talking about this universal truth, and in that sense he was a global preacher. But he was also had a keen insight, and he could not just speaking people at an individual level. He was speaking to an entire society. He could see the dynamics of how people are different. Just to give you an example, he wrote a book called The East and the West, something like that, Paschatto in Bengali. Like he brought about the contrast between the Eastern and Western cultures. So one example is the concept of cleanliness, and how that reflects on the psyche of the people in general as a society. He said, you see an Indian like a Hindu, he would take showers early in the morning, clean himself up, and then he will wear a dirty cloth. He doesn't mind wearing a dirty cloth. He will clean his room neat. He'll leave his shoes outside his door, but he'll leave rubbish outside. And by contrast, he said, well, I came to France, and even like hot country like Portugal, they don't have a place to go take a shower. I mean, he was in the middle of a summer and sweating in the best hotel out there. He couldn't find a shower. There was no shower. There was some public place where you can go take a shower. And he was like at his wit's end. He said, how can people go without a shower? But they're wearing exquisite clothes, and prim and plan. So basically, I mean, he was, and cleaning. This is I kind of know firsthand. Like when I was in school, there was a janitor who was kind of old, and he he used to talk about that he used to work for the Britishers, and he told many things, how it was great to work for them and how he was treated so nicely, and when there were parties he could feast and all that. And he said, you know, they are spick and span, but you know where all the dirt is? Under the carpet. So Swami, basically he was relating this, that the Hindu mind, the Indian mind is inward drawn. Always purity is inside. And the Western mind, or at least the Europeans in particular, that the cleanliness was outside. And Swamiji said, well, actually, it should be both ways, you know. None of them is right. Because purity is not just inside, and purity is not just outside. Everything is pure, inside and outside. And of course, he saw his own society, and he was not at all happy with people. So many sadhus meditating, he said, this is tamas, you know. People have to come out, work. The mantra for the Indian society was work. Don't get into this idea that I'm meditating. Well, first you have to work your way through. And he used to say that the Western people, they are so much into work, they have to meditate. They are ready for this. So, to conclude, I would say, I'm reminded of you know, Swami Turiyananda. He was a brother disciple of Swami Vivekananda. And as he was growing up in California, he wanted Turiyanandaji to go to the West in California and establish an ashrama in the middle of nowhere. And Turiyanandaji said, is that something you want me to do? He said, no, that's the mother, that the Divine Mother wants you to do that. I said, come on now, why are you saying Divine Mother? You want to get it done. And Swami Vivekananda said, no. The Divine Mother wants you there. Go there and forget India. And he did a wonderful job. Sukalyan gave a talk on that. But after a while, he got sick, and he became homesick. He heard that Swami Vivekananda is not in good health, and he wanted to go back and meet Swami Vivekananda one time. And I mean, he also was one of the disciples who had visions like Sri Ramakrishna of the Divine Mother. So as he was planning to come back, Divine Mother appeared before him and said, you stay back. She showed him like all the disciples that are to come. And he said, yes, but I want to see Swamiji. And Divine Mother disappeared from his sight. And as he was coming back to India on the way, he heard Swamiji's death. And he never got to see him. And as it turned out, he never got back to America either, because the lady who was to sponsor that, she passed away. So anyways, Turiyanandaji was extremely distraught, and he kind of blamed himself to some extent. Like, I disobeyed him, that's why this happened. And he was one of them who had the opportunity of being with Swamiji for a long time. He traveled along with him for months in his Swamiji's last trip And he said that I always thought that Swamiji is my own, like our own. He belongs to our disciples. But now I can see clearly that he belongs to the whole world. And Swami Abhidananda, who also stayed here a long time, he wrote a song, something like that. You know, you might have heard it, like, "Oh Vivekananda, you're not just our Vivekananda, you're the whole world's Vivekananda." So anyways, what can I say in conclusion? That let's take up this teachings of Swami Vivekananda and Holy Mother and Sri Ramakrishna. Understand his teachings, understand them, and come to know that they are our very own. Thank you.
Thank you, Abhijit, for a thought-provoking account of the many important incidents in the life of Swami Vivekananda in his undertaking as the first global preacher. I'd like you all to do the closing prayer now, and then I'll do the announcements. Do you have it? Otherwise, I'll forget, Charlie, right? I think it's more natural to put it here. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Okay, so now I'll do the announcements for the week. Swami Yogatmananda is currently on a tour of Florida and Puerto Rico, giving lectures and sessions down there. He'll be returning next Sunday in time for the Sunday lecture, the title of which is Some Socio-Political Thoughts of Vivekananda, so continuing on the Vivekananda theme leading up to the symposium on January 27th, which is the birth anniversary. That will be a full-day program from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and has the standard format of the ritual worship starting at 11 a.m., flower offering and prasad lunch, a video, a symposium at 5 p.m., singing, and a supper prasad at 7 p.m. So you're all invited for that program. The Tuesday and Friday classes are video classes this week. Swami Sava Priyananda of Vedanta Society of New York, a very good speaker on Vedantic topics. So you're invited to come and view that here on the premises or from YouTube at home. Let's see. I guess those are the major announcements for the week. So I guess we can now proceed to Arati, and followed by soup supper downstairs. And you, of course, per our standard tradition, you can meet Abhijit on the way to soup supper, as we do per our normal tradition.